A wealthy and racist woman accuses a young black boy of stealing her $1,000 necklace. Before being sentenced, the boy is saved by his best friend and reveals something that leaves everyone in shock. First, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any emotional story. Lucas could hardly believe the turn of events. He had grown up in a modest neighborhood, where dreams were distant and opportunities rare. Being friends with Liam, the son of the wealthy Vivian, seemed like one of the few windows into a world he never imagined he could belong to. That night, in the grand mansion, everything fell apart at once. The birthday party, which should have been a moment of joy, quickly turned into a nightmare. The hall was full of smiles and conversations, soft music filled the air, and waiters passed by with trays of champagne. Lucas, feeling a bit out of place, tried to stay comfortable by Liam's side. He knew he didn't belong in that world, but he tried his best to fit in, at least for one night. Suddenly, the mood of the party changed. A murmur grew among the guests. Vivian's favorite necklace, an ancient and priceless piece, had disappeared. The necklace, a family heirloom, was a symbol of status and tradition. Everyone knew how much sentimental value Vivian placed on the jewel, and its disappearance caused an uproar. The doors were locked. No one would leave until the necklace was found. Discomfort and anxiety spread throughout the room. Lucas watched, trying to understand what was happening, until he saw Vivian crossing the hall toward him, accompanied by security guards. Her eyes were fixed on him, and her harsh expression was almost incomprehensible. What could he have done? Before he could react, one of the guards snatched his backpack from his hands, opening it right there in front of everyone. Lucas, completely shocked, was speechless. The silence that followed was deafening. From inside the backpack, the guard pulled out the necklace. The jewel shone intensely under the room's lights, but the shine wasn't enough to divert attention from Lucas's stunned face. His eyes widened, and his body froze. There was no way that could be possible. He didn't understand. How had the necklace ended up there? The guests stared at him with disapproving looks, whispering to one another. He felt the weight of judgment in every look, in every murmur. Vivian, who moments earlier had seemed like the warm and kind hostess, now looked at him with disgust. Lucas tried to mutter something, but no words came out. His mind was blank, and his racing heart made every second feel like an eternity. "How could you?" Vivian's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "I let you into my home, let you be friends with my son, and this is how you repay me." Lucas shook his head, trying to process what was happening, but nothing made sense. He would never touch something that wasn't his, let alone a necklace so valuable. He searched for Liam's eyes, hoping to find support, a word, something to get him out of this unbearable situation. But Liam, his friend, was as shocked as everyone else, unable to say anything in his defense. The shame Lucas felt in that moment was overwhelming. Every second there seemed like torture. He heard the whispers, felt the looks of disdain, and knew that for everyone there he was already condemned. No matter what he said, no one would believe him. He was the poor boy, a guest at that party by grace, and now accused of being a thief. Thief in the house of the wealthy. Lucas felt the weight of the handcuffs on his wrists as if they were a symbol of the injustice crushing him from within. The distant sound of police sirens made time seem to slow, each second filled with growing anguish. He looked around, desperately searching for a face that showed empathy or understanding, but all he saw were reproachful glances. The guests, who had been so entertained by the luxurious party moments earlier, now whispered, shocked and curious, as the police entered Vivian's mansion. "I didn't do it," Lucas stammered, his voice trembling. He repeated those words like a mantra, but each time he said them, his innocence seemed to disintegrate before the collective disbelief. Vivian, furious, kept a safe distance, her eyes sparkling with rage and disgust. "The necklace was in your backpack, Lucas. Don't lie." Vivian's voice was cold and sharp, as if she were dealing with a traitor. The mere thought of being considered a thief in front of everyone, especially Liam, his friend, was unbearable. But there he was, being treated like a criminal, an imposter who tried to take advantage of a rich family's generosity. As the police led him toward the door, Lucas felt a knot in his stomach as he saw his parents arrive, their faces full of confusion and panic. They had been called urgently, But nothing could have prepared them for the scene they found. Their son, handcuffed, being taken away for theft. His mother's eyes met his, and Lucas saw the terror in them, something that hurt him more than any accusation. She wanted to believe him. He could see it, but the evidence seemed undeniable. "Lucas, what's happening?" His father's voice was grave, broken with anxiety. He didn't know what to think, but the pain of seeing his son in this situation was almost unbearable. Lucas wanted to scream his innocence again, wanted to explain that it was all a terrible mistake, but shame choked him. "I don't know how this happened," Lucas murmured, his voice sounding distant even to himself. Couldn't explain the inexplicable. There was no way the necklace had ended up in his backpack. Someone had put it there. Who? And why? Police, indifferent to Lucas's internal struggle, pushed him into the patrol car, shutting the doors with a metallic click. The sirens blared again, and the car began to pull away from the mansion. Outside, the guests gathered, whispering and looking at Lucas's family as if they were watching a tragedy unfold. He was being taken away, and nothing he said could change what had just happened. News of the theft and Lucas's arrest spread like wildfire throughout the town. It was the perfect story for gossip lovers. A young boy from a modest family accused of stealing a valuable necklace at one of the most exclusive parties of the year. The headline on local newspapers and social media said all the public needed to know: thief at elite party, young man caught in the act. Online comments were cruel and relentless. "I knew he wasn't trustworthy, always so quiet, like he was plotting something. That's why we should never mix these types of people with us." The words pierced like invisible knives, echoing in Lucas's mind even when he tried to block them out. He knew the entire town had already judged him guilty, without even hearing his side of the story. His parents, who had always worked hard to keep their reputation clean, were now looked at with disdain. The whole family carried the stain of shame. Lucas's parents' visits to the prison were silent, weighed down with sadness. His father could barely look at him, while his mother held back tears. They knew that without concrete evidence of his innocence, Lucas could face serious legal consequence. The fear of losing their son to a system that seemed unjust consumed them entirely. Sophie stood in front of the lawyer, her eyes tired but filled with determination. The lines on her face revealed sleepless nights, the weight of the situation heavy on her shoulders, but nothing compared to the pain of seeing her son, Lucas, dragged to prison, accused of a crime she was certain he didn't commit. "Mrs. Sophie, I know this is difficult," the lawyer began, his tone serious yet calm. He was a middle-aged man with a stern appearance, but his eyes showed compassion. "But the necklace was found in Lucas's backpack. We need something more concrete, some proof to change the narrative." Sophie gripped her purse tightly, her fingers pressing hard into the leather strap. "I know my son is innocent. Someone put that necklace there. I can feel it. He was only at the party because he's friends with Liam. Lucas would never throw everything away for something like that." The lawyer sighed, removing his glasses and rubbing his temples. "We'll try, Mrs. Sophie. I'll use everything I can. But the situation isn't simple. The media has already spread the story, and people have made up their minds. That complicates things, especially for young men like Lucas. Unfortunately, he's been judged before even stepping into court." In the days that followed, Sophie devoted herself to examining every detail. She visited neighbors, friends of Lucas, even his co-workers, anyone who could give her a clue, something to help clear her son's name. But most people just shook their heads sadly or avoided the subject. Some said they knew Lucas was a good boy, but they had no way of helping. Visiting the police station was another painful blow. Seeing Lucas behind bars looking so worn down was tormenting. Each visit was an emotional roller coaster. "Mom, I swear I didn't do anything," Lucas repeated, his voice hoarse, his eyes pleading for relief. "I know my son," Sophie would say, holding his hand through the cold bars. But deep down, she too felt the weight of doubt, not because she didn't believe him, but because the system seemed to have already decided Lucas's fate. Despite the lawyer's best efforts, the story of the necklace found in Lucas's backpack was a massive hurdle. Every attempt to explain what might have happened was countered with simple evidence. The necklace was there. Lucas was at the party, and no one else seemed suspicious. During the trial, Vivian not only worked closely with the prosecutors, but also pushed for Lucas to receive the maximum sentence. To her, it wasn't just about the necklace, but about a principle. No one could challenge her, and anyone who did needed to understand the consequence. With her influence, she made sure to be present at every hearing, maintaining an unyielding stance. Her words were sharp when discussing the case with the prosecution's lawyers. "He must be punished," she said in a low voice, loaded with restrained anger. "He cannot go unpunished for stealing something so precious." However, not everyone was convinced of Lucas's guilt. Liam, Vivian's son and Lucas's friend since school days, began to question what really happened that night. In the first few days after the arrest, Liam remained silent, confused and torn between his loyalty to his family and the friendship he had always had with Lucas. But as time passed, something inside him began to bother him. Lucas wasn't the type to do something like this. He knew him too well to believe that his friend, with whom he had shared so many moments, would be capable of stealing. While Vivian pushed the prosecutors to give Lucas the maximum sentence, repeating that traitors must pay dearly, Liam began to question whether there was more behind his mother's anger than she was willing to admit. Since childhood, he had known Lucas, trusted his honesty, and the unshakable character he had always shown. His friend would never do something like that. So why did his mother seem so unyielding, so fierce in her pursuit of justice? One night, after yet another argument where Vivian insisted that the case be resolved as quickly as possible, Liam went to his room with a heavy heart. Couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, and he knew he needed to understand what was happening. Determined to investigate, he began to recall the events of that night at the party. What did he really see? What did his mother really see? Could she be hiding something? In the following days, Liam started listening in on the conversations his mother had with the lawyers. He overheard bits of discussions that left him increasingly confused. Vivian insisted on details about the necklace, about Lucas's betrayal, and how justice had to be served. But whenever she mentioned that night, her voice wavered, which wasn't typical of his mother. Why was she so nervous? There was something deeper there, an underlying tension he couldn't explain. Liam knew he needed answers, but he wasn't sure where to start. So he decided to mentally revisit the night of the party, searching for anything that might have been overlooked. And then he remembered something that made him stop in his tracks: his mother's behavior that night. She was much more nervous than he had noticed at the time. From the beginning of the party, Vivian seemed distracted, frequently looking around as if she expected something bad to happen. This didn't make sense. That was when Liam decided to confront the situation. He directly asked Vivian about her nervousness at the party, but his mother cut him off immediately. "I was worried about the necklace's security, that's all," she replied with a coldness that didn't convince Liam. He knew she wasn't being sincere, but he didn't want to push her at that moment. The feeling that something was being hidden grew in his chest, and he knew he needed to act, or it was too late. Driven by doubt, Liam began talking to others who had been at the party. Friends, employees, even some guests he didn't know very well. With each conversation, he grew more confused because the versions of events didn't add up. Some people mentioned seeing Lucas alone at certain moments, but no one could confirm exactly where he was when the necklace disappeared. Others recalled seeing Vivian walking nervously around the house, talking to staff more privately than usual. This didn't make sense to him. Liam was increasingly distressed since confronting his mother. Vivian, true to her pride, showed no signs of weakness. In court, when Lucas took the witness stand, everyone in the courtroom barely breathed. His lawyer had prepared him for that moment, but no rehearsal could replicate the emotional weight. With a trembling voice, he began to speak. "I know many people here believe I'm guilty. I know everything seems to point to me, but I swear, I didn't steal the necklace. I would never do something like that." He glanced briefly at his mother, Sophie, who was sitting in the front row. Her look was a comfort, a reminder that, at least to her, his truth mattered. "That necklace. I didn't even know it existed before all this mess. I never thought something like this would happen to me." Lucas paused, trying to hold back his tears. "My family taught me to be honest, to work hard. I would never do anything to shame my mother, my father." His voice faltered, and he swallowed hard, trying to regain his composure. The defense attorney stood and looked at the jury, using Lucas's moment of vulnerability, emphasized the emotion brought out by his testimony. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a hard-working, honest young man whose life has been turned upside down by an accusation that, at the very least, seems dubious. The necklace was found too quickly. There are no witnesses who saw Lucas take the item. All we have is a backpack that could have been handled by anyone in that house. Is it fair to condemn this young man without concrete evidence?" he said, scanning the faces of each jury member. On the other side of the room, Vivian remained stiff, showing no remorse. But Liam, seated beside her, began to feel suffocated by the growing doubt. The inconsistencies he had noticed in his mother's story left him restless. Vivian's unyielding stance kept him from speaking up again. When Lucas's testimony came to an end, the defense lawyer concluded with one final plea to the jury, asking them to look beyond the flimsy evidence and consider Lucas's character. He was not a criminal. He was a young man being unjustly accused of a crime he didn't commit. During the trial recess, Liam wandered the courthouse corridors, feeling a mix of anguish and frustration. From the beginning, he had been torn between believing his mother's narrative and trusting in the innocence of his childhood friend, Lucas. Their friendship had always been solid, marked by laughter and confidences, but now everything seemed to be crumbling in the face of such a serious accusation. As Liam mentally replayed the events of that fateful night, a memory struck him like lightning. The room where Vivian's necklace was supposedly stolen. It had security cameras. How had he not thought of this before? His family's mansion was equipped with cameras in several locations, and that room would be no exception, especially given its valuable contents. But something was off. No one had mentioned the footage throughout the trial, not even his mother. Was it possible the footage had been forgotten or deliberately concealed? Liam felt his stomach churn. Possibility that his mother might be hiding something began to take shape in his mind, but he didn't want to believe it. Still, that information needed to be verified, and fast. With his heart racing, he rushed to the waiting room where Lucas's lawyer was meeting with Sophie, discussing the next steps in the defense. "I need to talk to you," Liam interrupted, his voice anxious and his face pale. The lawyer, surprised by the interruption, asked for a moment and pulled him aside. "What's wrong, Liam?" he asked, noticing the urgency in the young man's face. Liam took a deep breath before dropping the bombshell. "The cameras. The room where the necklace was supposedly stolen. It has security cameras. Why hasn't anyone mentioned this until now?" The lawyer was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. His eyes lit up with newfound hope. This could be the breakthrough they needed. Immediately, he turned to Sophie, who watched the conversation with a mix of anxiety and hope. "We need those footage," he said, already plotting the strategy in his mind. "If there are recordings, we can prove Lucas didn't take the necklace. This could change everything." Sophie, still in shock from the new revelation, nodded her head, though the fear that there might be something more behind the story left her uneasy. The cameras really showed Lucas was innocent. Why hadn't this footage been presented from the start? With this new card up his sleeve, Lucas's lawyer quickly returned to the courtroom. He knew that this break was crucial, and there was no time to lose. Approaching the judge, he formally requested access to the security camera footage from the room where the theft was alleged to have occurred. "Your Honor, we have just been informed that the room in question is equipped with security cameras. However, these videos were never mentioned by the prosecution, and we believe they may contain crucial information for clarifying the facts. In the interest of justice, we request that these images be immediately made available for review." The request caused a stir in the courtroom. Vivian, sitting on the other side of the room, could not hide the tension that was taking over her body. What had once been a look of firmness had now turned into an uncomfortable rigidity. Liam, observing his mother closely, noticed the brief flash of panic she tried to conceal. Something was wrong, and he knew it. The judge, after a brief deliberation, granted the defense's request. The court authorizes access to the security camera footage. Does the prosecution have anything to say about why this footage was not mentioned? The prosecutor hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the revelation. He tried to come up with a convincing response, but the lack of clear explanations only served to increase suspicion. Something was being concealed, and the defense knew there was a good chance to uncover the truth. As the court's technical team worked to retrieve the footage, atmosphere in the courtroom grew even more tense. Sophie held Lucas's hands, who remained silent, but with a new spark of hope in his eyes. He felt that something was finally in his favor. Footage could prove his innocence and lift the weight of that unjust accusation off his shoulders. Liam, on the other hand, was in a whirlwind of emotions. Why hadn't his mother mentioned the cameras? What exactly was she hiding? The revelation of the footage would not only bring the truth about the necklace, but could also expose even deeper secret. When the footage began to be displayed in the courtroom, everyone held their breath. The camera showed the room where the necklace was kept, perfectly organized, moments before the party started. The room was empty. Lucas had not yet entered. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the screen, waiting for the crucial moment when the truth would finally be revealed. Vivian averted her gaze, her nervousness evident in every gesture. She knew something was about to happen, something that would change everything. The footage vividly and clearly displayed Vivian's mansion. The lawyer quickly advanced to the crucial moment. There was Vivian, visibly agitated, in the room where the necklace had disappeared. The footage showed her entering the room with a tense expression, her movements quick and nervous. Vivian approached Lucas's backpack, which was resting in a corner of the room. She looked around, making sure no one was nearby, and then, with an almost desperate agility, began to rummage through the backpack. The cameras captured every movement. Vivian carefully opening the zipper, taking something out, and then putting something back in with a look of satisfaction and relief. When the defense attorney paused the video and zoomed in on the moment when the necklace was placed into the backpack, a low murmur swept through the courtroom. The camera showed Vivian closing the backpack and leaving the room with an urgency that could not be ignored. The lawyer wasted no time and continued with the presentation. He detailed what the footage revealed. Vivian, driven by jealousy and a desire to protect her son's relationship with Lucas, fabricated a false theft scenario to incriminate the young man. The motivation was clear: jealousy over the close friendship between Lucas and Liam, something Vivian saw as a threat to her own relationship with her son. The courtroom was in shock. The spectators watched with a mix of disbelief and horror, while the jurors tried to process what they had just seen. Sophie, who had endured weeks of anguish, was now crying silently, but her eyes shone with new hope. Lucas, sitting next to his mother, felt a wave of relief mixed with anger. The weight of the accusation was beginning to lift, but the emotional damage had already been done. Vivian, who had previously appeared confident and relentless, was now in despair. Her attempt to maintain control quickly crumbled. She stood up abruptly, her voice trembling as she tried to claim that the footage might have been manipulated to incriminate her, a desperate attempt to cling to any remaining shred of hope. The judge, however, was not swayed by the unfounded claim. He and the court had seen enough to recognize that the evidence presented was irrefutable. With the same coldness demanded by the facts, the judge instructed the court to prepare for final deliberation, indicating that the evidence had spoken for itself. Vivian confessed that, over the years, her desire to maintain social status and privilege had consumed her. "I didn't know what else to do to protect what I've built," she said, her voice breaking. "I looked at Lucas and saw the relationship he had with my son, and envy consumed me. I wanted to show him and his mother that they couldn't compare to me, that they weren't worthy of being on the same level as me." Lucas's defense attorney, still shocked by the confession, decided to present new evidence to the court. During the investigation, something surprising was discovered. Vivian was no stranger to fraud and theft. Years ago, she had committed a similar robbery against a wealthy family, using the stolen jewelry to build her own fortune and social status. The revelation came with documents and testimonies proving Vivian's connection to this dark past. The courtroom was in shock. The final revelation about Vivian's true nature, made everyone turn their gaze toward her with a mixture of disbelief and condemnation. Lucas and Sophie, who had gone through unimaginable hardship, felt a mix of relief and anger. The weight of the injustice was finally starting to dissipate, but the emotional impact of the situation was still immense. As Vivian was taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her face was covered with a mix of shame and despair. Her fall from power and status was a bitter reminder that, in the end, truth always has a way of emerging. Vivian's arrest represented more than just a legal consequence. It was a symbol of a turbulent journey in search of justice. With Vivian formally charged and sentenced, court prepared to discuss the compensation owed to Lucas and his family. The decision to acquit Lucas and his family was a welcome relief, but it could not erase the suffering they had endured. The compensation received was a recognition of the injustices they had faced. But for Lucas and Sophie, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, where emotional healing and rebuilding their lives would become their priorities. And you? Have you ever experienced or know someone who has experienced an injustice? If so, write justice now in the comments. This way, I will know how many people who watch this channel have experienced some form of injustice. Now, stay tuned for another moving story.